problems, I think.
Okay,
I was out recording something earlier and left him alone for about 2 hours, which he can handle. But now he thinks we are going to play. And so he will probably, and if an ambulance goes by, he likes to sing to them, so you'll get to hear that. But
it's usually how my cats are. They don't want nothing to do with me until I'm doing shows, and then they're like here looking at me and clawing me.
Cats in particular don't care what you're doing as long as they're the center of the world. So if you're doing something else, then they're like, hey, this is time for me to sleep on your keyboard.
Oh yeah, exactly. Like they keep jumping up here on the counter. I'm like, what are you doing? Get out of here.
Kind of like dogs can tell. They can tell when you're petting them with your hand versus your feet. Like when you're just on the couch, you're like, hey, how you doing with the feet? They're like, that's bullshit. Pet me with your hands. Like they totally know what you're doing.
Right. We're rolling. So Jacob, you want to go ahead and do our little Patreon shout outs?
Do you want me to record this on my end?
No, you don't have to. I got it. I got it all here.
I mean, you can if you want, but that's up to you. Let me look at our email real quick. Because I don't remember last week's new patron. Here we go. All right, I got it. I'm ready when you are, buddy.
All right, go ahead. You can go ahead. 3, 2, 1.
It's another episode of Open Micros Podcast. And before we start the show, we have to give a shout out to Mr. Derek Diamond and Miss Kathy Gutierrez Figueroa. Thank you so much for subscribing to our Patreon. And if you want to be as cool as them, go to www.openmicros.com. Let's play some music.
It is Wednesday night, and it is time for the Open Micers Podcast. My name is Jason Robbins.
I'm Jacob Craig, and I'm very excited for our guest tonight, as is Jason Robbins. I know for a fact. Few things bring me as much joy as a podcast host than when I book a guest that Jason is shitting his pants over. And that's who this is tonight, because we have comedian, author, political satirist, someone you might know from the Political Orphanage podcast, among many, many other things. It's Andrew Heaton. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on. I'm delighted to hear that I'm summoning such bodily elements from the two of you. I shoot for either voiding bowels or getting an erection. And I'm glad to hear that at least one of you's had this with me coming on.
Well, I've become such
one of each so far.
Yeah, I've become such a huge fan of yours over the last probably 6 months or so, because I followed you back in the days of like Night Attack and stuff like that.
Oh, wow.
And
okay, yeah.
I used to hear you on there all the time, and I'm like, man, this guy's really sharp and funny. And then I heard you had, you were on, I think it might have been politics, talking about the Political Orphanage.
Good friends with Justin Robert Young. We're podcasting allies / lovers. We're basically like common law married within podcast world. And he'll come on my show and I'll come. Justin's a great guy.
I got to talk to him a few years ago on one of my older other podcasts I used to do. So that's kind of how I met him. And but yeah, ever since I started following you, I've been trying to follow everything you do. I'm going to start getting your books and all that. I haven't gotten any of your books yet, but I do enjoy your dramatic readings of your some of your humor stuff that you've put out there.
Yeah, I did Los Angeles' Hideous, poems about an ugly story, about maybe 8 months ago now. Yeah. And it got to #1 on poetry on Amazon, which means that weirdly enough, at this point in my life, I am a more lauded poet than I am comedian or lover. I had not anticipated that being where I would be in my high 30s, but whatever, I'll take it. That's fine. I guess I'm a great poet.
But you've had such an interesting career. I mean, you started out, you're from Oklahoma, and you went to Oxford, not Oxford, Mississippi, but Oxford in England.
The pretentious one.
Yes.
The one that's cold. I went there, yeah.
And tell us from that point on what you've been up to.
So I did, as you point out, I'm from Oklahoma. I graduated from college there. I didn't leave Oklahoma until I was 23. And then I went over to the United Kingdom. I studied at Brasenose College in Oxford. And then I ended up becoming a tour guide in Edinburgh, in Scotland, which sounds weird to people until you realize, like, my undergraduate was in history, and also the second Scots get a job as a tour guide, they move to Spain. They don't want to be in Scotland. So I was like the best thing. I was the closest thing to a good Scottish tour guide you could get. So I did that. I ended up, I went back from there to Los Angeles, where I lived in a tool shed behind my best friend's house and made ends meet by being a background actor, or commonly known as an extra. So it was my job to be the blurry figure at the back of the room,
I learned
to drink something.
It's not easy to make a living as an extra or background actor.
I have no desire to ever do that again.
I did it maybe 2 or 3 times, and I was like, yeah, I'm done with it. I don't want to do this. It's not glamorous at all.
It's really fun as a novelty. If you want to see what it's like being on set, and you want to see how TV works, it's really cool because you get to be on the inside. That's fun. But keep in mind, you are well beneath like porn level in terms of status in Los Angeles. Like whatever the lowest like bukkake level porn is, you are a couple of notches below that. And you were treated that way. Like the last time I did it, I was so, because having done it several times, you learn pretty quick that, like, first of all, try to, if somebody gets to sit on a bench, be that guy, because that means that you can just sit there. You don't have to walk all the time. And then like bring a book. Like if you're like, could my character read a book? They're like, couldn't care less. Great. Because then you're just getting paid to read a book. So like when I would go on set, I'd bring a backpack with me with a book and like maybe some snacks in it and things. And the last time I did it, I was walking to a place and somebody was like, hey, you asshole, why do you have a backpack? And I was like, I just thought maybe they're like, go put it in the fucking extra room. And I was like, all right. So I started walking back that way. And then another guy's like, hey, dumb fuck, where are you going? And I was like, I'm going to put this backpack. And like, they kept yelling at me. And I was like, you know what? You guys are paying me like $200 a day. And if I scream cut in the middle of your scene, it's going to fuck up everything for all of you. So like, you were rapidly I'm not ever going to do this professionally. I'm not trying to get a SAG card. So like, if you keep making such assholes, I can definitely, I know I can cost you more than the $200 I will deprive myself. For sure. I think it'd be about $20,000. And like extras don't realize that. They actually have a lot of power to screw things up, and they should when people are being dicks to them. Because there's no reason for that. There's no reason for that. It's always the kind of the low status people that are frustrated. They want to take it out on the one group they can take it out on. Civilization is predicated on suppressing that urge to be an asshole.
Yeah, because the few times I've done the whole background actor thing, it's a whole lot of hurry up and sit here out in the sun for like 8 straight hours. Snacks? No, it's not snack time. You're gonna have to sit here in the freaking sun. Oh, you want to sit down? There's some nice concrete over there for you to sit on.
And again, like the people at the bottom rung, like I assume they're being mistreated by the people at the middle and the top, although I rarely interact with
everybody kind of mistreats the person directly below them.
So the extras are like the only group everyone's allowed to be mean to. So I remember I was on this one show where like it was like, hey, we're doing a lunch break. And I was like, oh, good lunch break. So I wandered over to like the little crappy cafeteria thing with macaroni or whatever, the craft services. And I'm just like putting macaroni on my plate and mashed potatoes. And I heard this guy go, get your filthy paws off the food. And like, I literally couldn't even interpret it. I was like, somebody just put their hands in the food? Like they should use a spoon like me. So I didn't flinch. And as a result, everybody thought I was supposed to be there. It was nice to me. But then later I was like, oh, they were just like, never again, never again.
Yeah, I completely get that. Like I'm right there with you because I never want to do that again, ever.
Yeah. So I did that for a little bit. Didn't like Los Angeles. Ended up doing a complete about face. And I went to go work for the United States Congress. I worked for a couple of members from Congress, one from Oklahoma, one from Pennsylvania. And while I was there, I got a scholarship to go to the University of Edinburgh, where I used to live, and get a degree in international politics. So I did all of that, but I was doing stand-up at night. So I was a public servant during the day and mostly got yelled at by old people. Which is what you do when you're doing constituent liaison positions. And then I do stand up in the evening. And then when I went to back to Edinburgh, kind of the same thing. I was reading about IR theory and political economy and all this stuff. And then at night, I was the designated comedian at Saturnalia Cabaret, which I think was probably the apex of my comedy career, because I went up as a comedian after the girl who took her clothes off, but before the guy that ate light bulbs. And I was like, this seems like a good fit for me. I feel like this is where I ought to be. And did that, and then moved back to the States, and ended up moving to New York, where I became a television writer. Kind of didn't even plan to do it, but there was a show called The Independents, which was starting up with Kennedy and Matt Welch and Camille Foster. And they had heard rumors there was a guy in New York who liked Milton Friedman and was funny. And they decided that they wanted me to be that guy. So I ended up being a television writer for 4 years, maybe 5 years. I don't know, 3 to 5 years. I don't really remember. And then ended up moving to Austin, Texas. And I'm down here now. And I've been a full-time podcaster about 3 years. I host a show called The Political Orphanage, which is an engaging, oftentimes funny podcast for people that are tired of the red team versus blue team thing. So,
and that's what really drew me to it, because I was listening to Justin Robert Young, Politics, or PX3, as everybody calls it. And both of you guys kind of, because I was looking for something. Like, I'm not red team, I'm not blue team.
Yeah.
I was looking for something, and I found you guys, and you make me feel calm about everything going on in the world right now.
Which sadly, I have to say, I think is needed, but not lucrative. I think people actually need that. It doesn't make, like, if I were to rename my show Drinking Liberal Tears, or better, Drinking Libtard Tears with Andrew Heaton, I would immediately triple my income. Or alternately, if it were called Fight the Southern Bigots with Andrew Heaton, or so, as long as I picked a team to hate, and all I was doing was reporting, and every episode was basically, they're even worse than you thought. That makes a lot of money. It's really easy to attract people. What I find, though, is there are all these kind of scattered, nuanced, independent thinkers that there's no way for me to put up a bat signal for them. But when they do find me, they're so relieved.
Yeah.
It's like they've been out in like a really hot day and they come into air conditioning and they're like, oh, thank God, this is what I wanted.
That's exactly it. Like, I don't know if you got to dabble in a little bit, Jacob, but definitely check out the Political Orphanage. And you do also the Friday Release Valve, which is one of my favorite. You have a panel.
Thank you.
You have a panel of comedians that it's sort of like where you just, if nobody's ever heard it, it's the Friday Release Valve, and it's just basically just a panel of comedians. See, he likes it too, and just kind of go through the wacky headlines of the week. And if you like that kind of panel, aspect of like listening to comedians just make fun of stuff, it's right up your alley.
Yeah, it is explicitly designed for people driving home from work on a Friday who are just done thinking. Because I do pretty thinky stuff the rest of the week. Like, I do author interviews, and I read The Economist, and I write about stuff that involves ism, and then talk to experts and things. And so it's pretty substantive, right? So by the time Friday rolls around, I'm like, I really just want to talk to another degenerate comedian friend about why a guy in Florida robbed a taco truck naked with a sword, and we'll we'll get into that. So it's very much like very, very light. And I kind of, for my own sanity, I wanted to have different podcasts that just weren't political, so that when it gets, because it does get horrible. And so I wanted to do that. And I'm trying to figure out what to do with Friday Release Valve, because during the pandemic, I kind of bit off more than I could. I shouldn't say I bit off more than I could chew. While living alone during lockdown, I basically filled my time by creating new podcasts.
Yeah.
And now that I have friends again and I can leave my house and eat tacos in public, I'm going, I've got to figure out how to balance this stuff.
Well, if you need a couple of comedians to come on, I mean, I'm just saying, me and Jacob are professional comedians, so we'd love to be on there.
I'll hit you up.
And
oh yeah, man.
One thing
I have a question, Jason. Shut your filthy whore mouth.
Man. You shut up.
I have a question that kind of is related to politics and a little bit Friday Release Valve.
Okay.
Recently, Kid Rock appeared on Tucker Carlson Tonight, expressing interest in running for president in 2024.
Right. Yeah.
And I want to know how you would feel being under the regime of President Kid Rock. Yeah,
that's a great question, Jacob. So I have maintained for the last 7 years that we are living in a sitcom. Where, like, you've heard of like simulation theory, like Elon Musk is a thing about that. And like, I think somewhere around 2016, when we elected a former game show host as president, that that somehow the universe split, and like right now, President John Huntsman is like actively talking to his vice president about how to get corporate tax rates at the right level. Like that's what's happening in the real universe. In our universe, we keep doing all like that's I literally thought 2020 was going to be election between Trump and Marianne Williamson, because I was like, Oprah's psychic versus game show host seems like it would be a great episode. And I'm just trying to figure out who's the star of the sitcom. I'm pretty sure it's not me. I think I am very opposed to what I want, back at being a background extra. I think that's what I am in the universe. Is I'm just once again a dude walking around getting screamed at. So I don't know who the focus point is. Maybe it's that Zelensky guy. Maybe this is all just like background to Ukraine. That might be. Maybe he doesn't realize he's actually in a dark comedy.
I have a theory that when they turned on CERN, that they ripped a hole in the universe, and a lot of us were sucked into this alternate reality that has split off from the main timeline. Like at least half of us have, especially all of us that sort of like, like the Mandela effect, like those of us who remember the Berenstein Bears, we're the ones that got sucked into this weird alternate universe.
I think that's entirely possible. Like when they activated CERN, if I'm not mistaken, I think that was during the Obama years.
Yeah, it was like 2012, I think, somewhere around there.
Right. Okay, so right around that time, if you'll remember, an Icelandic volcano went off so that you couldn't fly anywhere in Europe for like 2 weeks. And also the president was fighting pirates in Madagascar, or like Somalia, right? And like I remember reading the headlines being like, wait a minute. We can't fly planes because of a volcano and our president's fighting pirates? That might have been the split point, because that did not seem like something I should be reading in the 21st century.
Yeah. So I just want to ask you, how do you keep your cool? Because doing political stuff, like like the political orphanage, how do you keep that, like objective, that thing you have to where it makes me calm, because I hear stuff and I'm like, oh my God, the world is ending.
Yeah.
Like,
do you know who's a really fun example of that? If you go back about 2 years before he killed himself, John McAfee came on. And like, I was so calm with John McAfee that it threw him off. Cause like John McAfee was in a Faraday cage and would not reveal to me where he was living. And like would go like John McAfee would talk like I imagine a James Bond villain would while addressing an underwater dome over a sound system. Like, you have to free yourself from the prison of your mind. And he'd like do that and get real intense. Then I'd go, okay, how do you feel about tariffs? Do you want them higher or lower? Like, and like eventually he just started laughing because he couldn't get me to flinch. I think it helps a couple of things, Jason. In answer to your question, I have worked in partisan media in the past, and I really didn't like it. I don't like being in a partisan position. I think that broadly speaking, people in media are either acting as explorers or they're acting as attorneys. And I view myself as an explorer. So I have opinions. I don't claim to be objective, nor do I claim to be carte blanche. I definitely have my own ideological and temperamental bearings, but it's my job to kind of put on an old timey Victorian diving outfit and like plunk into the waters and find interesting stuff and go, hey guys, I found a shark. That's what I'm doing. It's not my job to be a gladiator, which is, I think, what most people in political media are doing, where it doesn't actually matter whether my team is right or wrong or whether they've got a good solution. It's just my job to fight the other team. So I don't like doing that. And I think it kind of helps that just the way I'm wired, and I think that this is a huge, huge downside for me, both personally and career-wise. When I find somebody that I don't like, or kind of bristles me, my inclination is to figure out how they got to that weird position.
Yeah.
And to figure out, like, surely we've got something in common. There's got to be some common ground where if aliens landed, I could turn and go, hey, we both agree about Walmart. And we both get guns and shoot the aliens. So that's what I end up doing, is trying to figure out where's the middle ground here. And then the other thing that really helps is like, because I don't view myself as a gladiator, I view myself as an explorer. It's very easy for me to go, wow, you have a very odd position. Like, how did you get there? Like, I think that that's a horrible idea, but like, clearly you've thought about this. How did you arrive at that conclusion? Because I am really interested in how people think. Like I do find it just fascinating how conservatives understand things, how progressives understand things, how libertarians understand things. Because when you get into it, you're like, oh, okay. I just usually it's like I disagree with your variables, but your logic actually kind of makes sense. Your equation makes sense, and I want to figure out what that equation is.
Well, let me ask you a question since you've been in that that TV area. When it comes to people like Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity,
Kid Rock,
what's the white-haired guy on CNN?
Anderson Cooper.
Anderson Cooper, like people that are so far right or so far left, do they believe half the shit that comes out of their mouth, or is it just for money?
So I'm not gonna. I've met Tucker Carlson a couple of times, but I don't really have a good grip on where he's at. Nor same with Sean Hannity. I met him in an elevator once. We got along okay for the length of the ride. So I don't want to target anybody specifically here because I don't know them very well. I would say it's a mixed bag is the short answer. There are people that really believe what they say. There are also a lot of people that I don't think it's that they sit down and go, I really don't believe this stuff. It's more like they go, what does my base believe? Okay, I believe that now. And they're being led around by whoever they're trying to get clapping and money from. I think that a better way of understanding most people in political media is not so much that they are like lying grifters. I think that has a little bit of an edge to it. It's more like, just keep in mind that if any one of them were approached by Universal Studios and they're like, you want to quit doing this and be a movie star? All of them would immediately drop whatever they're doing and being a movie star. All of them.
Well, see, that's why it brings me to that question, because I think that everything they do is to get people riled up, and riled up people make you money.
Yes,
through advertisement. That's exactly
that's again
how
why I rent rather than own a home.
Yeah,
don't like riling people up.
Maybe we should start ranting, Jacob. Let's start like doing some major political rants.
If you rename your show Tirades Against fill in whatever group you hate, Laplanders or something, you'll definitely get more money. You'll get more attention. No, you bring up a really good question, a really good point, Jason. And I have two things for people to kind of think about in regards to that. The first one is, at the end of the day, everybody in media is selling something. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't have other goals and things going on. I view myself as a very earnest, hardworking guy, but to some extent, I am selling people things on my show. Now, in my mind, what I'm selling is humor and feeling more aware and smart of the situation, right? So I'm selling smartness and humor. But for a lot of people, and this is something that I wish more pundits would seriously ask themselves, what am I selling? Because a lot of people are selling fear and hatred, and I will not do that with my life. I will not make my livelihood dependent on selling people hate and fear. And I think that it is an unethical and debased thing to do with your brief existence on this planet.
Do you think it'll ever change?
I think it's all structural. So I think that it will either require the consumers to get sick of it, or it will require a difference in the media. So for example, like having worked in television, I can tell you there are a lot of people in television, at Fox, for example, who are very intelligent, good people. And they are very constricted by the medium that they're working in. So like I podcast, right? So if I bring on John McWhorter or somebody, we can have a good hour, 20-minute conversation, at least 45 minutes. We can really let stuff breathe. I can go, now you said this. I want to make sure I understand this. Is this what you mean? Oh, that's interesting. I think this, right? We can really kind of draw that out and let everybody dive into it. With television, you're operating in 5 to 8 minute intervals that are broken up by commercial breaks. You have X amount of people on camera. So like I've done TV hits occasionally, and you're basically just shouting bumper stickers at each other. If I do an 8-minute TV hit with 4 people, mathematically, I'm going to get around 2 minutes to talk. And so if they're like, hey, how do you think we should solve Israel versus Palestine? I'm like, 120 seconds, I can solve this issue. That becomes an issue. And then I think the other thing too you're saying is that like Twitter is an even more bifurcated version of that. Twitter, I'm not talking to Jacob on Twitter. I'm really just talking at Jacob for the benefit of my supporters, right? So those things change. But before I lose sight of it, I do think I'm going to coin the Heaton partisan hack test So if any of your listeners are on the Nobel or Pulitzer Prize committee, the Heaton partisan hack test is this. Take anybody you want. It could be Tucker. It could be Sean Hannity. It could be Anderson Cooper. Pick anybody and ask yourself, if they were a partisan hack and their goal was just to make money and get listeners and viewers by riling up the base, demonizing the enemy, and selling hate and fear. If that were their goal, what would they be doing differently than what they're currently doing? So like in my case, you're like, oh, if that's what Heaton were doing, he'd be talking about much more controversial topics. He'd be hating on various people much more. He would have an echo. Like I can point to all sorts of ways that I would be making more money if I were a partisan hack. But if you find somebody and you go, I don't know what they would do differently if they were a partisan hack, pretty good chance they're a partisan hack. And I leave that to you and your viewers to determine where their mileage is in terms of that calibration.
See, I picture somebody like Tucker Carlson, when he takes off the microphone and he gets in his car, like, he listens to like black metal on the way home, and then he gets home and then he fixes himself like a glass of wine and he watches like RuPaul's Drag Race for the rest of the night. Like that's what he does in his off. Like he's a layered guy, but the guy you see on Fox is like, I can't handle this dude. I would not want to be in a room with him.
I can give you a little bit of insight on Tucker because I interviewed him before. I interviewed him when he was capital T Tucker, not when he was all caps Tucker. So I interviewed him after he had been on CNN and he'd had the whole flame out with Jon Stewart, but before he became like the biggest guy at Fox, right? So I met him during that interregnum, and I did just like an interview with a DC outlet. We talked to stuff. After the interview, we're wrapping up. I went, can I ask you something? And I don't mean this offensively. I'm not trying to rile you up, but like a ton of people hate you. Like, how do you deal with that? Because like literally millions of people following the Jon Stewart thing hated Tucker Carlson and even more hate him now. And he very earnestly, he went, you're going into political satire, right? And I went, yeah. And he goes, okay, I only care about what my family, my friends, and my coworkers think. I do not care what anybody else thinks. And if you do, you are going to be just an imploded shell of a man. And I highly advise you not to do that. I think Tucker probably should expand that circle a bit more. I think I should probably contract my circle a bit more. I think I should have a slightly thicker skin, but I think that's to some extent what's going through his head. Is he is really not at all bothered what
I don't know if I should thinks about him. I don't know if I should commend that or I don't know, feel sorry for him. I don't know. It's a thin line there.
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Jake. Yeah. I think you were going to say something.
No, I was going to say, in any case, we promised you that we would get you out of here at the top of the hour.
Oh, is it 7 already? Damn.
It's already that time, Jason.
Well, tell you what, how about I do this? I can give you guys, I'm about to hop on family game night, so I can't be more than 3 or 4 minutes late, but if you got like a closing question or something, I can pop off at you.
You got anything for him, Jacob? Because I've been hogging him the whole time, and I'm sorry.
No, please. I understand that you're a super fan. Ask him one last question.
Oh gosh, what else do I want to say real quick? I don't know if I have a question, but I just want to say I really admire the work that you're doing. I'm gonna try my best to try to get people to listen, especially people that are close to me in my life that have fallen towards the extreme right. I have I have people in my life that try to bait me with texts and sending me memes and like stuff like that, and I just ignore it.
Yeah.
And I don't there's people close to me, siblings and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm gonna try to push them in your direction so they can.
Thank you. I truly, I really do appreciate that, because I have to say, I'll go on other shows periodically, where that the other host will have a private jet and a golden toilet and all these things, and then I come back to my cardboard box and get out my little microphone and talk about loving each other and do as so that is really, really kind of you to say. I appreciate that, and then it reminds me that what I ought to do is I ought to make a web address of /get along or something, because I've had a bunch of episodes that are a really good entree for people of any political persuasion. So I interviewed Jonathan Haidt, who's a great guy and a brilliant thinker who came up with moral foundations theory. If you're not familiar with it, basically he posits that we all have 6 moral foundations that are almost like taste buds that react to things. Like people react to pestilence, or they react to injustice or to tyranny. And depending on where you're at politically, you have some taste buds that are very active and some that aren't. So like conservatives tend to kind of have all of them, and they're more even. Progressives tend to be really bothered by suffering and injustice, but not so bothered by the other ones. And libertarians just care about tyranny. Could not give less of a crap about anything else, right? But it also, like, once you get that, you kind of understand it. Like when you're talking, like if I'm talking to a conservative, I don't have a gag reflex. I've taken his test multiple times. I have no gag reflex. I'm actually pretty low on loyalty, like to group loyalty. Like I don't like, I'm like, I don't know. I used to live in Scotland. I don't have much in common with Wyoming. I have more in common with my friend Hepburn than I do with some guy from Louisiana. So like I'm pretty low, but I get that like when Republicans see like somebody like the president salute with a coffee cup, they're not faking it. They really are truly offended by that. Like, and I think once you understand that, and same for the progressives, that like when the progressives like really flip out because they see suffering, like they are viscerally feeling that, and it's not an act they're putting on. So, and then another great one is like I did an episode with Peter Boghossian, who wrote a book called How to Have Impossible Conversations, and Peter's also a great guy and is really good at being able to lay out strategies to talk to people. I have sucked those into my life. Like instead of saying what I might have used to have done, which is go fuck yourself. I don't do that anymore. like I've trained myself to go, that's interesting. How did I think I'm missing something. Tell me how you got there. And I find it really helps. And then also a really, really good one that I'd recommend. I'd love it if you checked out my show and listened to the episode of it. But if not, check out him in general. Arthur Brooks wrote a book called Love Your Enemies, I think. And I brought him on the podcast. He made a very big impact on me. And I can say I've now lived his observation, which is that contempt is just a useless, counterproductive emotion. It's one thing if Jacob and I are angry at each other and we feel very passionate, like Jacob's really in favor of raising the corporate tax rate to 19%, but I think we should drop it to 12%. We're just fighting like cats and dogs. That's okay. Passion's all right. Anger's all right. Contempt is when I go, Jacob's a piece of shit. He is just beneath he's irredeemable. And Jacob turns around and goes, that guy wants a 15% corporate tax rate because he's a bigot, right? Like when we do that, that's when people shut off.
That's what the world's turned into. And it's, right. I don't know if we have a way to backslide from that. And
that's why we should vote for President Kid Rock.
Kid Rock, yeah. I'll give you two tips that help me a lot. So whenever I'm talking to my conservative friends and they're ragging on progressives, or I'm talking to my progressive friends and they're ragging on my conservatives, I either think of my friends that are in whatever group they're talking about, or I just like a really helpful tool everybody can use whenever you're discussing the team you don't like. And there's definitely a team that either irritates you or scares you, right? Whenever you're thinking of that team, think about them and talk about the top 10 smartest, kindest percent of that team. Because I think a lot of the time we get in the habit of viewing the very bottom as emblematic. And like when you look at the Republican and Democratic parties, any organization that big has a lot of shitheads in it. And so like if you're going to use that as the emblem, but like I don't know, like when I think of conservatives, I think of like, all right, like I have family members that I think are really decent people that voted for Trump. I disagree with them, but I know they're good people. My progressive friends that love Bernie Sanders want to try and solve poverty by having the government run accordion factories or whatever weird thing he's up to. I'm like, all right, I know that this is batshit crazy, but at the same time, I know that these are good and kind people, right? So I feel like a lot of that just involves us having a little bit more grace and just giving the benefit of the doubt. I think that's a strong thing of like, anybody I interact with, I assume that you're a decent human being until you prove it otherwise. I never go in and go, oh, you voted for so-and-so? I believe I can psychically tune your motivation and that you're lying to my face and that like if I pull the mask off, you're a bigot or a communist. I don't do that. I take people that you're probably trying to help folks and we have different ways to do it and we need to figure out where we disagree and we need to be open that maybe we're wrong. I've been wrong about all sorts of stuff in the past. I assume I'm wrong now. So I'm going to talk to you about this, but I'm going to hope that you approach me in kind.
Well, Andrew, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. I know we need to get you out of here. Just real quick, tell everybody once again, where they can find you and your podcast that they can listen to.
So if you liked the syrupy, drippy, let's all love each other stuff and the smart authors I mentioned, go check out the Political Orphanage. It is a podcast explicitly designed for people that are tired of this red team versus blue team fight. Everybody that listens to the show is friends with somebody they disagree with. That's the singular commonality. I think my show is probably the only one in political media where the majority of the people listening to it don't agree with me, but they really like me. You don't find that phenomenon very frequently on other shows. So the Political Orphanage is where I'll send you. If you're like, that guy was really funny, but I didn't care anything about the political stuff, go check out Friday Release Valve. I also have a new podcast out. It's called Losers, Pretenders, and Scoundrels, which is a funny history program. I bring on my best friend, who's also a comedian. One of us will pick a historical figure. The other one will talk to him about it. And it's just kind of a fun show. And if you're like, that guy's really funny, but I hate the sound of his voice, then buy one of my books. I've got Inappropriately Human, 21 short stories. And I've also got Los Angeles is Hideous. You can put both those on your coffee table. People will be impressed with you. They'll have sex with you on the coffee table, unbidden. They'll be so impressed. So all of those things.
And he has read excerpts from each of those books on the Political Orphanage. So if you go back into the archives, you can listen to those episodes. And like I said, go check out the books. Go check out the podcast. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us on the show here. And
Thanks
for everyone else, go check us out at Open Micers on Twitter, Instagram, Open Micers Podcast on Facebook, at Open Micers Podcast at gmail.com. And openmicers.com takes you straight to our Patreon to give us at least $1 a month to keep the lights on right here. So check us out next week right here on Open Micers Podcast.
It's on 2024. I just gotta go. It's really fun. Thank you so much, guys.
Absolutely, man.
Bye.
Thanks for having. Yeah, bye. Thank you.
All right, that was fun.
That was fun.
All right,
we need to make.
Thank you guys for watching on Twitch. I'll be back in just a little while with Nerd Cave Retro. Hope you guys enjoyed that, because that was an awesome. Nobody can see it because your face is being covered right now by the. But if you like that, definitely go check out Andrew, the Political Orphanage podcast, and Friday Release Valve, and at Mighty Heaton on Twitter is where you can find him. So thank you guys for watching. We will see you next week. And if you want to come back for Nerd Cave Retro, I'll be back in about 40 minutes.